This video doesn't attempt to tell the entire history of the Cripple Creek Victor District. Rather, it relates numerous unique stories and history, preserved both by intent and chance, pieced together to recreate that energy, that mood and atmosphere, lending credibility and tangibility to the wonderful history of the Cripple Creek Victor District. I encourage you to sit back and watch this video. The first settlers of this area began using these mountain parklands as open range for grazing cattle in the 1870s, long before gold was discovered in the Cripple Creek area. Bob Womack worked on a cattle ranch and prospected for gold in his spare time along the southwest slopes of the Pikes Peak for years. He found minor amounts of gold in the local creeks, but nothing to write home about until striking gold in Poverty Gulch in October of 1890. Bob filed his claim at the assay office in the county seat of Colorado City, calling his claim the El Paso Lode. Not too many people took Bob seriously, and none were willing to invest in exploratory digging. Winfield S. Stratton was one of the early believers in Bob's story and ventured over to the Poverty Gulch area. A carpenter from Indiana living in Colorado Springs, he was interested in mining and had taken some courses in geology at the Colorado School of Mines. In 1874, he made his first mining investment, pouring $3,000 into a silver mine in the San Juan Mountains in southwest Colorado. The mine was worthless, but Stratton was hooked. He sold his successful carpentry business for $1,000 and became a miner. For the next 20 years, his life revolved around mining. When he heard Bob Womack's stories and his rumblings about gold in Cripple Creek, he packed up his belongings and moved to the camp to begin exploring. A granite ledge on the side of Battle Mountain caught his eyes. His studies in geology helped him determine it must be the edge of an ancient volcano, possibly containing gold ore. On July 4, 1891, Stratton staked a claim enclosing the ledge and called it the Independent. Less than 10 years later, Stratton sold the Independent for $10 million. The town of Victor was founded in 1891, shortly after Winfield Scott Stratton discovered gold nearby. The town was named after the Victor mine, which may have been named for an early settler, Victor Adams. In 1892, Harry, Frank, and Warren Woods founded the Mount Rosa Mining, Milling, and Land Company. Battle Mountain, located just above Victor, had the largest, most prolific mines in the district, and the town became known as the City of Mines. Victor officially became a city on July 16, 1894. In 1894, the Woods brothers discovered gold when they began digging the foundation for a building, which resulted in the creation of the Gold Coin Mine. At that time, 8,000 people lived in Victor. The town of Victor boomed as the surrounding Cripple Creek mining district quickly became the most productive gold mining district in Colorado. The mining district, which hit its peak in 1900, became the second largest gold district in the country's history. Although Victor's fame was overshadowed by its neighbor Cripple Creek, many of the best gold mines of the Cripple Creek district were located at Victor, including Stratton's Independence Mine and Mill and the Portland Mine. Half of Battle Mountain's gold was extracted by the Portland Mine, which was called the Queen of the District. Mine owners and investors lived in Cripple Creek, while most of the miners for the district's 500 mines lived in Victor. As soon as the Cripple Creek mining district was starting to produce gold, transportation became a critical issue. Hauling loads of heavy gold ore to the railroad at Florissant by horse and wagon was very expensive and not very efficient. Two separate groups realized the need for a better system and developed plans to bring railroads into the district. The first to arrive was the Florence and Cripple Creek, a narrow-gauge line which came up Phantom Canyon from the Arkansas River and arrived in the district in 1894. Shortly thereafter, in the same year, the standard gauge Midland Terminal arrived in the district from a connection with the Colorado Midland and Divide. A third railroad reached the district in 1901. This one was built by several mine owners who had mills in Colorado Springs. They decided the rates by the other rails were too high and that the existing systems were passing up their mills. They built the Colorado Springs and Cripple Creek, or the short line, following a route around the south flank of the Pikes Peak. By the year 1903, the cities of the Gold Camp and District were linked together by two lines of streetcars on the electric interurban railway. Again, the first railroad to reach this area was the Florence and Cripple Creek, reached it in 1894. Unfortunately, it began to struggle financially as other competing railroads built to a standard gauge, the Midland Terminal and the Colorado Springs and Cripple Creek District Railroads. By the early 1900s, the railroad was in serious financial trouble and merged with other railroads of the area under the Cripple Creek Central Holding Company. A final and large flash flood destroyed enough of the Florence and Cripple Creek's right-of-way to convince its new owners it was financially unwise to spend money rebuilding it. The line was abandoned and scrapped. The railroad went out of business in 1915. The Colorado Springs and Cripple Creek District Railway, also commonly called the Short Line, was one of the best railroads of its time. But with the dwindling of rich gold veins in Cripple Creek and the area added expenses of mining, the Short Line was forced into bankruptcy. The last train ran in May of 1920. The Midland Terminal Railway was a short line terminal railroad running from the Colorado Midland Railway near Divide to Cripple Creek. The railroad made its last run in February of 1949. There were two significant labor strikes in the Cripple Creek District. The first one was in 1894, and the second strike was in 1903 and 04. In the first strike, some of the indirect causes of that strike involved irregularity in the hours of employment at the mines and the variation in the working day. The camp was new and had not settled down a regular life as yet, and custom had not been given time to develop its unwritten law. So, for instance, when a new mine started up, its owner or manager relied entirely upon his own judgment as to how it could best be worked, and there naturally arose a great diversity. Some mines worked 3 shifts a day, some 2 shifts, some 1. In some of the mines, the men worked 8 hours, in others 9, and in others 10. The wage at all the mines were uniformly $3 per day, irrespective of the length of the shift. So a group of the district mine owners announced they would lengthen the workday from 8 hours to 10 hours without raising wages. The owners were a powerful group that employed about 1/3 of the area's miners. Workers protested the longer workday, and the owners relented, reverting to the 8-hour day. But there was a catch. In their new plan, workers would only make $2.50 a day instead of their original $3. Miners weren't surprised, and they retaliated by forming a union called the Free Coinage, which became affiliated with the Western Federation of Miners. Unrelenting, the mine owners imposed their 10-hour day, February 1 of 1894, and 6 days later, the union workers went on strike. Some of the biggest mines agreed to the 8-hour and stayed open. Still, the strike decimated the gold camps. By the end of the month, every Colorado smelter was closed or running part-time because of the dwindling amounts of ore. Mine owners who were holding out for the 10-hour day brought in strike breakers, and members of the union retaliated with violence and threats. When miners attacked a group of deputies, the El Paso County Sheriff's Department asked the governor of Colorado for help. 300 troops were sent to the area. They only stayed 2 days before being called back, and the owners closed their mines. A period of calm followed, punctuated by periods of minor violence. In May, union representative and mine owners met again. The owners offered an 8-day with a wage of $2.75. It was rejected. The state's populist governor, Davis Waite, a pro-union man, stepped in, and on June 10 of 1894, both sides signed an agreement that gave workers what they wanted. The strike of 1903 and 04 got its start far from the mines of the gold camps. This strike started in the mills of Colorado City, 40 miles away. The mills were run by non-union men. In 1902, the Western Federation of Miners Union made its move, organizing the workers. A year later, the union laid out its demands for higher wages and shorter hours, the same demands made a decade earlier. The Standard Mill in Colorado City employed 45 of its men for $2 a day. Those workers wanted $2.25 a day. Even though the low wage only affected a few, the cause was picked up by thousands, with more than 3,500 quitting their jobs. But the union only had about half the men in the mills on their side. When violence erupted and the governor ordered in troops, union organizers traveled to Cripple Creek area, where they announced to mine owners that the Colorado City mills were unfair and that shipments to them must stop. In those mines, operations stopped when men refused to work. As word spread about unfair treatment of the mill workers, the entire mining industry shut down. In this mining strike, the Mine Owners Association had a powerful tool in their arsenal that they had lacked previously. They had a viciously anti-union governor, Jim Peabody. He sent in hundreds of troops under General Sherman Bell, who arrested union leaders, activists, city and county officials, and staffers of a newspaper that published an editorial he didn't like, all without legal warrants or any charges other than military necessity. And to further stem the violence, the governor placed the gold camps under martial law, and by September of 1903, over 1,000 National Guard troops occupied the camps. During the 6-month occupation, hundreds of union members and sympathizers were rounded up and imprisoned in full bullpens, while others were ordered out of the district. Unfortunately, this labor strike turned deadly, and on June 6, 1904, a train depot where non-union miners were waiting for a train at the town of Independence, it was blown up. 13 men were killed and many others injured. The day after the depot in Independence was blown up, the Mine Owners Association and their Citizens Alliance organized a rally in Victor to place blame on the WFM union. The anti-union rally was held in a vacant lot on the corner of Victor Avenue and North 4th Street. Shots rang out and 2 more men were killed and others were injured during this ensuing riot. Union members and sympathizers were arrested and confined in the basement of the Armory, which is currently the Victor Elks Lodge, and in outdoor bullpens. The governor sent the militia back to the gold camps, which was again placed under martial law. The press was silenced, freedom of speech and assembly were abolished. Within a few days, the 1903 and 04 labor war ended, and the WFM union was driven from the gold camps. The mine started up again, and organized labor was totally defeated. Miners were allowed to work only if they had identification cards from the Mine Owners Association saying that they were not affiliated with the union. With advances in technology, mining operations shifted to using electricity rather than steam generated from water and coal-fired plants to power their equipment. The Woods Investment Company developed plans to construct the Skagway Dam and hydroelectric plant on Beaver Creek to generate electricity that would be delivered by the Pikes Peak Power Company to the Gold Coin mine, as well as other customers throughout the district and beyond. In 1899, with no expenses spared, 500 men were assembled in 3 camps to execute the project. Camp 1 was in charge of the rockfill and ironwork required to build the steel-faced granite backfilled Skagway Dam, located 5.5 miles east of Victor on Beaver Creek. Camp 2 was responsible for building 23,200 feet of wood-stay pipeline, supported by grading earth shells, bridges, and tunnels for delivering water released from the dam to the power plant. Camp 3 built the Skagway hydro-powered plant for generating electricity in a very rugged, remote location on Beaver Creek. The hydroelectric power plant began operations in May of 1901. The hydroelectric power generating facilities continued in operation until 1965, when a flood weakened the dam, filled the wooden stay pipeline with silt, and caused other extensive damages that led to the abandonment of the power plant. A devastating fire in August of 1899 virtually destroyed most of the city of Victor, causing a loss estimated at $2 million. Beginning shortly after noon, the fire raged until evening, consuming everything in its way. It had its origin, it is thought, in the Merchants Cafe adjoining the Bank of Victor on the corner of 3rd and Victor. A strong wind from the south fanned the flames, and in a few minutes, all of the surrounding homes were gone. Efforts were made to stop the progress of the flames by blowing up buildings in their path and by means of dynamite, and all afternoon the hills have roared with explosions, but the effort was in vain. The fire claimed the Bank of Victor, the post office on the corner opposite. It crossed 3rd Street and followed the row of blocks between 3rd and 4th Streets to the north, taking the Victor Banking Company. The Western Union Company's office and the office of Colorado Telephone Company, the Hotel Victor on the opposite side of 4th Street, and the 3 great shaft houses of the Gold Coin Mining Company and its ore bins among the largest in the Cripple Creek district. From there, the flames were swept northward by a half hurricane, which was blowing and never stopped until they had taken the Florence and Cripple Creek Depot and the fine new depot of the Midland Terminal Railway. The town had been built in the early days of the camp and was of pine timber for the most part, and it all burned like paper. The following morning, hundreds of men began working to clear the debris. Businesses reopened in tents and makeshift structures. The city council appropriated $8,000 for building a new city hall and authorized regrading of streets before any new building commenced. To protect against the danger of future fire, the city council mandated that all temporary frame buildings be removed within 90 days, and that all the new commercial buildings be constructed with brick or stone. Plans for rebuilding were formulated immediately as investors and speculators poured into the city. Business lots without buildings after the fire were worth more than lots with buildings before the fire. Within 8 months, a totally new and more magnificent city was rebuilt. For the most part, the brick and stone buildings that line the streets of the business district today have cornerstones dating back to 1899 or early 1900, when the city of Mines was reborn after the Great Fire of August 1899. Victor's peak population hit 8,000 in the time period between 1900 and 1902. By 1910, the town of Victor was declining steadily as the gold mines became worked out and the cost of mining rose relative to the price of gold. Area miners enlisted during World War I, and the loss of workers created a steep decline in mining activity from which the area has never recovered. Gold mining increased in 1934 when the federal government raised the price of gold to $34 a troy ounce. But gold mining was shut down during World War II as a non-essential to the war effort. Some mines opened up after the war, but all the mines in the district closed by 1962. The Cripple Creek and Victor Gold Mining Company was formed in 1976 as a joint venture to restart mining in the district. From 1976 to 1989, the company produced 150,000 troy ounces of gold by reprocessing tailings and mining two small surface deposits. The Cripple Creek and Victor Gold Mining Company began the first large-scale open-pit mining in the district in 1994. In 1995, an open-pit gold mining operation, which taps into legendary mines, began on Battle Mountain. The Crescent Mine open pits are located a few miles north of Victor and is currently being mined by the Newmont Company. I came into this project doing the video on Victor in the same way that I approach most of them, and I try to condense the history down into one video. But I found the significance of Victor to be so great that it was impossible for me to tell the whole story and edit it down to one video. So please go view part 2 to continue this wonderful history of Victor.